Well, good evening, everybody. I'm Jonathan Wohl. I'm the local group chair for the Hunterdon Warren Group. And tonight, I'm Kip, Sherry, Joanne, Panone, and their respective groups. And I, in our group, are excited to have Noah Cheslin present. But before I talk about him, I just wanted to quickly give you notice of two things. I'm going to be sending off an email in regards to adapting to climate change. One's Queer Smile. Lewis Black sent me this, and she asked me to forward it on to everybody. It sounds like a very interesting discussion presented by Lehigh University. If you don't get it by tomorrow, something screwy happened, let me know. And the next thing is that in our efforts to get Noah to talk tonight, there's a discussion about the impact on wind farms as far as the Hudson River Canyon, I should say the Hudson Canyon Maritime Sanctuary proposal is concerned. And so I was calling all around, and Joanna actually found Douglas Zemeckis, and he said that he'd be happy to present. He's with the Rutgers School of Environmental and Biological Sciences, Department of Marine and Coastal Sciences. And hopefully they'll either be in October or December. Keep in mind, in November, we're going to be having, for our local group, a talk by Elliot Riga with the Highlands Coalition. He's going to be talking about some of the recent developments along the Route 31 corridor. The Clinton Township worked with the Highlands Council and sort of made a, I don't know, I call it a devil's bargain, really, if you live in the town of Clinton, where they can keep certain lands within the Clinton Township protected, but they sacrificed the Route 31 corridor. So you're going to see a tremendous amount of development there. You're already probably seeing it on south, just below the high school, the North Hunterdon High School, heading south on the right-hand side in what I thought was a park. And they're building in a large affordable housing facility right across the street. There's going to be another big development up in Annandale. There'll be a big, huge development. Commercial will be on 31, encouraged in 31 around Ocean State lots, and up to, and there'll be more permission for developers all the way up to Highbridge. So I think you'll find that interesting. He's going to talk about certain constraints and certain ways you might be able to raise your voice if you have any concerns about that. So keep your ears open for that. But as far as tonight is concerned, I'm pleased to say that in our presentation on the Hudson Canyon National Maritime Sanctuary, Noah Cheslin is the Associate Director of the New York Seascape Program, which is affiliated with the Wildlife Conservation Society New York Aquarium, is going to speak about the community-led effort to build support for the Hudson Canyon National Marine Sanctuary off of the New Jersey, New York coast. And so he's going to educate us about how this great biodiverse area, and I'm looking forward to our meeting with you tonight. Noah, thank you very much, and I'll turn the presentation over to you.
Thank you, Jonathan, and hello, everyone. And thank you all for the chance to meet with you tonight. I'm excited to walk you through some of the work that my colleagues and I and other partners across many different groups have been doing around the Hudson Canyon. And I prepared a brief PowerPoint presentation, so I'll walk through that first. But please, if you have questions, we're going to have time at the end for a conversation. So I really look forward to the discussion and the chance to answer any questions that I don't address in the PowerPoint and presentation to begin with. So let me share my screen just a moment.
And if you have questions, please put them in the chat and we'll get to them later.
That's right. Thank you. Let's see. Can everybody see that? Great.
Yeah.
So as Jonathan said, my name's Noah Chesnin, and I work for the Wildlife Conservation Society's New York Aquarium, and I'll be talking today about the Hudson Canyon, building support for a new national marine sanctuary. So just as a brief overview, I'll first of all give an introduction to WCS and the work we're doing in what we call the New York, New Jersey, and the New York Seascape program, and the work we're doing in the New York, New Jersey Bight. But I'll really focus my presentation on Hudson Canyon, walk through what makes it special, both ecologically and economically, and then talk about the National Marine Sanctuary designation process and the work we've been doing to build both government, stakeholder, as well as public support. And then talk about the next steps from here and ways both individually as well as you know, the New Jersey Sierra Club can get engaged. So to most residents in New Jersey or in New York, the Wildlife Conservation Society is, to most folks, the Bronx Zoo, the Central Park, Queens, Prospect Park zoos, as well as the New York Aquarium. We were founded in 1896 as both the Bronx Zoo and the New York Aquarium, and have been operating the parks since then. The aquarium is based in Brooklyn in Coney Island. And the picture on the right, the two pictures on the right illustrate both the rendering of our Ocean Wonder Sharks building and then a photo from the building, which opened in 2018. Though we're based in New York, we work globally. So the program that I work for, the New York Seascape program highlighted in red, is one of 16 priority regions around the world where WCS staff, and that includes scientists or policy staff or people that work with community partners, work to build, you know, increased understanding of marine and terrestrial wildlife and develop ways to promote, you know, community-based conservation efforts. So the team that I work for, the New York Seascape program, is based here in New York, and we focus on the waters of New Jersey and New York, as well as Long Island Sound. And you don't need me to tell you this, but it's a pretty busy place. And what we have here on the slide here is a map that the aquarium made with National Geographic several years ago. We handed it out for free at the aquarium, and I'd be happy to get the Sierra Club copies. We hand it out for free, so we're happy to distribute it to partners across the region. And what I'm trying to showcase here is that, you know, there's just a lot of both human activity, and then also it's a little hard to see on this slide, but this map also highlights the movement of different species of wildlife across the region. You know, from Cape May, New Jersey, up to Montauk. From the coastal bays and the rivers in New Jersey and New York out to the shelf break. And you can see where the darker waters start, there's an incision with a bunch of white lines, and that's Hudson Canyon. It's about 100 miles from the Statue of Liberty, and I'll be focusing my presentation on that really important habitat. But just to sort of give you an overview first of the New York Seascape program, you know, and this is our mission, and the work that we do is really focused on discovery, protection, and inspiration. So scientists on our team work to do original scientific research to better understand whether it's how marine species use our waters, with an aim towards identifying threats as well as opportunities to help protect those species and the habitats that they depend on. As an aquarium and a network of zoos, we also want to inspire our visitors and the schools and students and teachers that we reach, and really support an ocean ethic. We say New York ocean ethic because we're based in New York City, but it's really a New Jersey and New York ocean ethic, and a local marine constituency. And we do this really through three different sort of strategies or tactics: research, policy, and then education and outreach. Now, when most people think of the region, whether it's the city itself or Long Island and the Jersey Shore, people often think of how busy it is. There are more than 20 million people that live in the region where we're focused. And so there's a lot of activity, whether it's the port or the frenetic Times Square or the coastal development across our region. And so a big part of our work is just to help connect people from the region to what in some ways what makes this place special ecologically. And so when we ask, especially visitors that come from New York City, like what species are found in the waters around New York and New Jersey, and on land around New York and New Jersey, what species come to mind? First and foremost, probably would be pigeons and rats and other sort of terrestrial species that might be associated with the city. And they're often very surprised to learn about the range of biodiversity that's found off of New Jersey and New York. This is just a quick slide to highlight some of the range of species that are found here. Many migrate through at different times during the year. Some are resident, but we have over 330 species of fishes, and that includes 26 species of sharks, 14 species of skates and rays. We have turtles, a variety of marine mammals, cold water corals, birds and vertebrates, just an incredible diversity of life. And this is driven in part because we have, and for those who go swimming during the summer, or maybe are participate in a polar plunge in the winter, we have water temperatures that vary greatly over the course of the year, as much as 35, 40 degrees normally. And so this is partly what's driving the sort of incredible biodiversity, is that we have species that migrate in and out seasonally, and so we have species that might be found in the tropical or subtropical waters at this time of year, and then during the winter, some of the species north of here would migrate southward to find warmer waters during the winter than they would normally have off of New England or the Canadian Maritimes. So there's just this incredible array of species. And because we have such busy waters, there's a need to find ways to balance sustainable uses and conservation. And so that's really the aim of the work that the Wildlife Conservation Society and the New York Aquarium has here in our local ocean. So as I said, to do that, we focus on a variety of strategies, and I just want to walk through a couple of the sort of field research work that we're doing to help inform decisions made by local governments, state and federal governments to support conservation. So we work on several different species groups. The first are diadromous fishes. So probably the most well-known group of diadromous fish are salmon. We study other species, including the American eel and different types of herring, whether it's river herring or alewife. And we're studying those species in the urban rivers around New York City and in the Hudson River estuary. We're trying to understand how barriers such as vestigial dams, historic dams dating back to the colonial period, block access upriver for these species. And so, these species connect basically terrestrial and marine ecosystems. They're an important way of delivering basically nutrients to species upstream from the ocean, and also sort of showcase the connection between land and sea. So we're doing that research, for example, in the Hutchinson River in Westchester. We've also been working with partners across Long Island, and to some degree in northern New Jersey as well. One of the key species groups that we focus on are sharks. And the picture here on the lower left is Hans Walters, one of our field scientists, illustrating some of the different types of acoustic tags and satellite tags that we use to track the movement of both coastal and pelagic shark species across our region. So we have long-term monitoring projects looking at how sand tiger sharks, and that's the species on the right, both juvenile and subadult sand tigers are using coastal bays on Long Island, similar to how they use coastal bays in New Jersey and especially in Delaware Bay for nursery habitat. We also are tagging pelagic sharks such as the mako, the short-fin mako, and you can see the mako on the upper left-hand corner that has a satellite tag. And so we're able to track these sharks, especially the pelagic sharks, over great distances, as they swim across the ocean and come to the surface. It sends a signal to a satellite, which then sends an email to staff at the aquarium and Brock Zoo, tracking their movements. And so this is really important to better understand what habitats are important for them, and also to understand sort of what threats they face. So for example, with makos, many of the individual sharks that we've tagged have been either caught or caught and released even. So tracking the types of impacts that humans can have on these species is a fundamental part of our research. We also study marine mammals. And so this gets to some of the work I'll talk about a little bit later as well, but we have an ongoing partnership with the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, as well as with Equinor, one of the offshore wind developers. And one of the marine mammal monitoring projects dates back to 2016 and has been supported with work that was just relaunched actually today with Empire Wind and Equinor to monitor marine mammals in the Empire Wind lease area. So you can see the yellow star on the map in the center, that sort of sliver between the three gray shipping lanes has been leased for offshore wind. And so along with Woods Hole, we are monitoring marine mammals in near real time using the acoustic buoy that's photographed on the left. It sends, it basically records marine mammal vocalization, and we can detect 4 different marine mammal species vocalizations, and those are listed in the table on the upper right-hand corner. So sei whales, fin whales, the North Atlantic right whale, which is one of the most endangered species on the planet. There are only about 340 individual right whales left on Earth, and then also humpback whales. And so these are all protected species that use our waters. And so what we're trying to do is understand when they are moving through the areas that are being proposed for offshore wind or have already been leased, to better inform construction practices, to make sure that we're minimizing the impacts to these protected species. And what you can see, just this sort of snapshot from 2017, is that in June of 2017, all 4 species were found within the space of a couple weeks. And I was looking at this data just before getting on the PowerPoint, getting on the Zoom call this afternoon, and the buoys have detected fin whales today. So we continue to get data ongoing each day through the last several years, and we're trying to build this sort of baseline understanding of how marine mammals are using our waters to inform the best management practices for building offshore wind, as one example. Another project that we are engaged in is referred to as eDNA, or environmental DNA. So we are conducting samples across the New York, New Jersey bight And those black lines with the yellow dots highlight the track lines that we are sort of bisecting the bight. Each yellow dot is where we collect a sample of water, and then we can assess, basically identify what DNA is present in the water as one way to identify what vertebrate species are present in the region. And so, as you can imagine, part of the challenge of studying such a large area is to get sort of a wide picture of like what species are present at what times during the year, at what locations. And eDNA is a new technology, new technique that's being applied here that can really help at a sort of high level describe what species are present in what habitats at what seasons. And so this is really important. The sort of grid lines underneath the track lines, and those are some of the lease areas that had been proposed several years ago for offshore wind. So as a part of this work, we're trying to better inform how offshore wind can be developed, again, in an environmentally responsible way. So as Jonathan said, I'm here to talk about Hudson Canyon. So let's pivot to that. So as I showed earlier, this is that same map that we made with the National Geographic Society. Highlighted in red is the Hudson Canyon. So it's a really important ecological and geological feature in our waters. It's about, as I said, 100 miles south and east of the Statue of Liberty. And unless you're a fisherman or fisherwoman, if you're maybe a birder or you've been out whale watching offshore, chances are you've probably never heard of this place. So part of my goal tonight is just to raise awareness and build excitement about this special place. But we're also obviously trying to work to help protect and support conservation that balances sustainable use and conservation in the canyon. So here's just a sort of snapshot with some of the key statistics. So as I said, it starts about 100 miles southeast of the Statue of Liberty and spans another 350 miles offshore. So it is on the scale of the Grand Canyon. At its widest point, it is 7.5 miles wide, and it's really important ecologically. So hundreds of species call it home, at least at some point during the year. And that includes some of those deep sea corals that I mentioned, a variety of marine mammals. There's lots of different species of fishes, and that includes sharks, skates, and rays, as well as other species of fish, some of which are really important economically, whether that's tilefish or other fisheries for squid, flounder, tuna, both commercial and recreational fisheries. Because it's so large geographically, it's a place where there's a lot of upwelling, and currents are driving a lot of primary productivity. So you see, waters from the deep sea coming to the surface, which brings nutrients to the surface, at which point, with sunlight, you see large populations of algae and plankton that serve as the base of the food chain. It's hard to imagine the scale, and it's really hard to depict it, especially in a slide like this. But to put the depth in perspective, it would take more than 7 Empire State Buildings sort of stacked on top of each other to go from the sea floor to the surface at its deepest point. So it's this incredibly important place. Many people have never heard of it unless they're familiar with the fisheries or they've gone birding, but it's really, really important both ecologically and economically for both New Jersey and New York. And so back in November of 2016, the New York Aquarium put together a nomination proposing that Hudson Canyon should become a national marine sanctuary. We did so in November of 2016, and as you know, that was sort of a busy time in DC. And so we were proposing that the sanctuary, that Hudson Canyon should join a network of marine protected areas across the United States. And this is managed by the National Marine Sanctuary Program, which is a federal program under the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA for short. And obviously, in my line of work, it sounds like I'm constantly speaking in the third person. So I'll do my best, to highlight NOAA, the agency, as opposed to my own personal beliefs. But so the agency oversees a network of 15 national marine sanctuaries, and you can see those here with the white circles with the blue dots. So the closest sanctuary to New Jersey right now that's currently in existence is the Mallows Bay Potomac River National Marine Sanctuary. That's in the Chesapeake, and it's a national marine sanctuary that's been designated in coastal waters, right, in the Chesapeake, to protect important historic resources, especially shipwrecks. But so the sanctuary program is designed to identify and protect places that are of ecological value, as well as cultural value and also economic value nationally. If you've been whale watching off of Cape Cod or from Gloucester in Massachusetts, you've likely gone whale watching in Stellwagen Bank. So that's another sanctuary that's nearby. And as you can see, Hudson Canyon is listed as a yellow square, which is a proposed national marine sanctuary, as is another proposal off of Lake Ontario, and then one in California off of the southern central coast, the Chumash Heritage. So there's a network of these sanctuaries across the country, and a sort of process to both propose nominations and then designate sanctuaries. And I'll walk you through a little bit of that in a moment. So first, just to sort of describe why we proposed Hudson Canyon as a national marine sanctuary. There's a variety of reasons, and really from a conservation perspective, one of the lasting protections that we're seeking is to permanently protect Hudson Canyon and the region around the canyon from oil, gas, and mineral exploration and extraction. And so what you see here are two maps. On the left-hand side is a map from the late 1970s and early 80s, where you can see the incision from the contour lines from the canyon. And then the grid is where there were test drilling locations for oil and gas in the late 70s and 80s. And so dating back to that time, we've known that there are natural gas and oil deposits at the shelf break, and even potentially in deeper waters. And then the map on the right is from 2014. And the orientation is a little bit weird, but what you see is the eastern seaboard flipped on its side. And the red, green, and yellow dots highlight areas where there are known deposits of methane, where there are methane seeps and cold water seeps. And so off of the New Jersey, New York coast, you can see Hudson Canyon. And this paper from 2014 documented 50 known methane seeps, highlighting that there's a natural gas resource in the canyon. And in fact, these methane seeps are really important ecologically. They provide habitat for a variety of what are called chemosynthetic marine invertebrates, basically small marine invertebrates that use the methane as their source of energy. They don't rely on sunlight. They're in such deep waters. And so that they are sort of hotspots of biodiversity within the canyon itself. And so in some sense, the same methane resource that would be fracked on land or could have been fracked on land extends under the sea floor. And there are these seeps highlighting that there is a methane resource in the canyon as well. And so as a sort of lasting legacy for what we hope to establish through the sanctuary designation, we're seeking to permanently expand and protect the protections from oil and gas and mineral exploration off the Atlantic in an area where potentially there could in the future be drilling. This is definitely a topic that I'm happy to drill down into in greater detail. We also know, that there's an important renewable resource offshore as well. And this is something that both, the Wildlife Conservation Society and the New Jersey chapter of the Sierra Club have been working to support. My organization, as I highlighted both through our whale and marine monitoring, but also through our policy advocacy, has been working to support offshore wind in our region, both from a climate perspective, as well as from a green job perspective. There's a really important opportunity here to support offshore wind in a way that achieves both of our states' climate goals and contributes to national goals, while also balancing and minimizing impacts to marine wildlife. And we're thinking about that along the lines, as I've described earlier, from the perspective of marine mammals, but also the impacts potentially to marine fishes, and especially to sharks, the electromagnetic field impacts potentially. And so as a part of the work that we've been doing to support offshore wind, we have scientists that sit on advisory panels for New York State and for the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management. We've joined joint comment letters with the New Jersey Sierra Club and others supporting offshore wind projects in the New York, New Jersey Bight. And as a part of this proposal for Hudson Canyon, when we put together the nomination package back in 2016, we initially proposed an area that was deeper and further offshore than where wind was least, and where wind even was technologically feasible. And so we tried to deconflict the potential, of offshore wind in a sanctuary. And obviously, as time has progressed, technology has allowed wind to get into deeper waters. And so, at this stage, we have not yet taken a position on whether offshore wind should be allowed or not allowed within a sanctuary. But we have been talking actively with offshore wind companies, including Ocean Winds, and I'll describe, what their position a little bit later, but we've reached common ground with them in some ways, in many important ways. And we're also looking to, follow the lead of New Jersey and New York State in determining what areas, especially in deeper waters, are important both for offshore wind as well as for habitat protection. So this is sort of one of the issues that's sort of evolving as obviously offshore wind has expanded dramatically since we first nominated Hudson Canyon in 2016. And I'm happy to answer more questions about this as we get to the Q&A period a little bit later in my talk. In terms of other uses, other human uses, as I said, the canyon is really important for a variety of economic uses, including commercial and recreational fishing. And so, my organization and I'm sure others like yourself have been actively involved supporting sustainable fisheries in our region. And so back in 2015, and then again in 2016, we were involved in efforts to protect deep sea corals in the canyon, as well as efforts to protect forage species, so the small invertebrates and small fishes that serve as the base of the food chain. And so as a part of our recommendations, we have proposed that Hudson Canyon as a sanctuary not change how fisheries are regulated, but that it would increase research and monitoring with the fishing industry, and that better understanding could inform fisheries management decisions through the existing authorities, whether that's the Mid-Atlantic Fisheries Management Council, the Atlantic State Marine Fisheries Commission, and also NOAA's Highly Migratory Species Division. In terms of shipping, we, as I said, obviously the port of New York and New Jersey is incredibly important. One of the sort of important opportunities we see here, even though the proposed boundaries are deeper than where the shipping lanes are, we see an opportunity to do increased monitoring of ocean noise and to identify ways to monitor and minimize impacts to marine mammals, especially from vessel strikes and ships, vessel strikes and ship noise. So as I said, WCS nominated Hudson Canyon in 2016, and obviously, in November of 2016, we put together, and submitted the proposal. The federal agency conducted a review and determined that Hudson Canyon was a place of ecological and also economic significance, of national significance. And then, and that decision was made in February of 2017. And then, of course, we sort of pivoted to defense for most of the Trump administration, to the point where we were especially, and I know you were as well, working to prevent oil, gas, and mineral exploration in the Atlantic. And so, that effort was ultimately successful, at least for the last 5-year plan. We're currently, there's a 5-year plan that the Biden administration is developing for oil and gas, but it does not, at this point, propose areas off the Atlantic. That said, in June of this year, and this is like a snapshot from the White House website, as a part of World Ocean Day festivities, the Biden-Harris administration announced that they were initiating the multi-year designation process for Hudson Canyon, the deepest canyon along the Atlantic. They also announced other efforts to stem the tide of single-use plastic pollution, and develop an ocean climate action plan. And so what you can see here is how different types of ocean-based initiatives are all connected. Ocean climate solutions, single-use plastics, and then also habitat protection. And so that these broader efforts can fit together. So ocean-based climate solutions, including offshore wind, can fit together as a part of the Biden-Harris administration's efforts to also, protect marine habitat in our ocean backyard. So in June, the administration and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, initiated a 60-day comment period that ran from June 8th through August 8th. And they were really looking for input from the public and stakeholders on the goals for the proposed designation. So this sort of outlines, from NOAA's perspective, NOAA, the agency, the sort of goals that the Biden administration has for the National Marine Sanctuary. So you can see they want to support the long-term conservation of the area's marine wildlife habitats and maritime cultural resources, work to identify and raise awareness of the indigenous connections to the area. And we've been working very closely with the Shinnecock Nation in Long Island, and then also reaching out to other state and federally recognized tribes across the region. They identified the importance of highlighting and promoting sustainable uses in the area. And I think this applies both to fisheries as well as to offshore wind. That they see the need to balance sustainable uses and tell the story of the important economic and sustainable ecological values associated with those economic uses. They also, as I noted earlier, and this is definitely a shared goal with the New York Aquarium, seek to expand investment in ocean science and monitoring, and work to expand opportunities, not just for education and awareness, but also career workforce development. Really to have, whether it's, sustainable economic activities, fishing and wind, you need to have enhanced biological and ecological monitoring and that's going to take new jobs. And so there's, I think, an opportunity for NOAA and other federal partners to create career workforce development programs for New Jersey and New York residents to expand, the jobs that contribute to ocean health. And then finally, there's an important role for collaborative partnerships, and that could be with academia, that could be with community-based organizations, that could be with corporate partners, as well as aquariums and cultural institutions. And so NOAA seeks to work collaboratively with stakeholders and other partners to support the long-term goals and management of a sanctuary. So as I said, the sanctuary program, NOAA sanctuary program, initiated the designation, and this is really a multi-year process. And so we're currently in that scoping period. So the comment period ran from June 8th through August 8th, and that is by no means the only time where, whether it's the Sierra Club or other stakeholders or members of the public, have a chance to be actively involved. When WCS was thinking about ways to support habitat protection, we were drawn to the sanctuary program and the sanctuary designation process for a variety of reasons. And one of those is that it really has a slow, methodical, and stakeholder and public participatory process. So there's really a chance to have lots of participation from stakeholders, from youth leaders, from aquarium visitors and community leaders as a way to help build that ocean ethic that I described as one of the sort of foundational goals for the aquarium. So even though the comment period may have ended officially on August 8th, NOAA and the sanctuary staff are still accepting public comments. So individuals or organizations are still more than welcome to submit comments. And then as a part of what WCS and many organizations have been asking for is to establish what's called a pre-designation sanctuary advisory council. And we're very hopeful that NOAA will do so. This would create an advisory panel with 16 seats representing a range of stakeholder and community leaders. Would also have additional seats for local, state, and tribal governments, as well as federal agency partners, not from NOAA, but say from Coast Guard or the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, which oversees offshore wind permitting. And so this Sanctuary Advisory Council would meet regularly, would provide opportunities for public input, would provide a way to communicate actively between the NOAA, the agency, and the public, and to build input into the process as the agency puts together the sanctuary proposal, which is listed as step 2. And then ultimately from that proposal, which would have a range of alternatives for boundaries, for management measures, things like that, would go out for public review. So there would be a chance for another public comment period, probably in about a year to a year and a half. And then from there, assuming we can build consensus, NOAA would establish a sanctuary by formally finalizing the designation documents and setting up the first management plan. So it's a slow, democratic and methodical process, providing a lot of opportunities for public and stakeholder input. And that is both, we think a positive thing is a way to sort of build consensus, but we also understand that leaves, questions open, and not finalized, or, answers aren't determined until that final designation in a year and a half to 2 years, right? So that does create uncertainty and some questions, but at the same time allows for really robust and active public process. And so, during that comment period and now continuing into it, NOAA wanted to hear the public's views. Earlier in June, they were basically saying that the sanctuary designation is not guaranteed. I think we have more confidence that it's moving forward in a positive way, and that's in part because there was such a broad and really strong showing of stakeholder and public and even governmental support for this work over the last several months. So I want to walk you through some of the stakeholder and public, stakeholder and government support that we received, as well as the public and youth-led support that we saw as well. And so I'll sort of summarize that, and then maybe we can pivot to questions at that point. So over the course of the comment period, many different types of organizations, many individuals, many types of businesses weighed in support of the sanctuary. So, recreational fishing and boating organizations supported the sanctuary, offered conditional support as long as, the recommendations around fishery management authorities and that the fisheries management, stays in the hands of the existing authorities. So 12, local and national organizations, including the Recreational Fishermen, the RFA, and the American Sport Fishing Association, the Marine Manufacturing Association. So just a wide range of some of the recreational fishing groups, both locally and nationally. There were environmental groups ranging from Surfrider and some of the local organizations in New York and New Jersey, as well as some of the national organizations, including environmental justice groups or Audubon, things like that. So a range of organizations. We had support from 90 aquariums, zoos, and visitor serving institutions, including the Jenkinson's Aquarium and the Bergen County Zoo. We had support from zoos and aquariums across the region and across the country. 110 scientists, including many from Rutgers and Monmouth University, as well as Stony Brook, and then around the country. We had support even from cultural organizations in New York City. So, trying to build and broaden the movement for conservation. Carnegie Hall, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Brooklyn Museum, Brooklyn Academy of Music, all of these arts organizations expressed support for sanctuary designation and an opportunity that they see to partner to sort of tell the story and the importance, both ecologically and culturally, of the ocean in our region. And many different artists, curators, and other sort of cultural workers, theater directors, actors, sculptors, offered their support. We got support from teachers, middle, high school teachers, and other academic leaders. Because the comment period happened during the summer, I think many people were away from their computer, but we got a lot of support nonetheless. We also got support from the ecotourism industry. So some of the whale watching operations in New Jersey and New York, from birding groups, from surf organizations, as well as other sort of chambers of commerce and other hospitality organizations, like the groups that represent restaurants in New York City or various hotel chains along the Jersey Shore. And then, of course, from faith leaders, highlighting the cultural value and the spiritual value that the ocean holds for many different people and communities of faith across the region. We also were able to build support from a range of government and important stakeholders. So I highlight just the statement that New York State made on June 16th, but both the state of New York and New Jersey offered their support for the designation. There we see support coming, both bipartisan support, which is really exciting, in the House of Representatives, and as well as in the Senate support currently from Democrats. There are just fewer Republican senators in our region. We also saw support from Ocean Winds, which is the Ocean Winds is the offshore wind developer that has a lease that overlaps slightly with our initial proposed boundaries. And so they see the value of a sanctuary, and they also reinforce the importance of basically not having any overlap. And so, I think they provide one approach to balance and make sure that we achieve offshore wind, goals in our region. And we've been working very closely with them. There was also support from the Fisheries Survival Fund, which is the commercial fishing industry organization that represents the scallop industry, which is one of the largest fishing groups along the East Coast, and definitely one of the most economically important in our region. The scallop fishery is a very lucrative fishing industry, and they offered their conditional support. And then that the last logo at the upper right-hand corner is for a commercial fishing organization from Rhode Island that represents the squid fishing industry, and they actually opposed the sanctuary. So, this isn't all kumbaya. I definitely don't want to suggest that this is a certain, this is a fait accompli. There were critics and organizations that are concerned about the sanctuary proposal, and so one of those is the squid fishing industry group up in Rhode Island. As another big part of the work that we were doing was working to empower youth leaders, not just across New York City, but across the region. And so we, whether it was, working with a high school student, as illustrated on the left-hand side, Bryn Heller is a high school student in the Bronx who put together her own video PSA and then her own petition supporting the designation. And she worked actually with students in New Jersey to do a variety of outreach, social media outreach, and get support across New Jersey for this work. But then also, the students from across the region also testified at the public hearing. So there were actually 10 students. One of them had to leave quickly, but 10 students that testified at the hearing in New York City as a part of the comment process. WCS also worked to engage visitors to all the zoos and the aquarium here in New York City. And so we had visitors, whether it was doing their own drawings or adult visitors signed petitions, or families took photos at a photo booth that was submitted. All of these efforts were submitted to NOAA as a part of the comment process. And so, we had 323 volunteers that gathered over 20,000 petition signatures, drawings, and photos. We also had online activists that generated over 10,000 online petition signatures. And then, just as a sort of a fun way to engage visitors, we had volunteers and visitors dancing the can for the canyon. So a little cute way to sort of activate people and find fun ways to express support for this designation process. So what's next? So first off, there's, as I said, this is just the very beginning of a multi-year designation process. And so, there are ways to get engaged. The aquarium is hosting, our visitors can learn more about the sanctuary. And this is a picture of the Canyon's Edge exhibit that we have to sort of highlight this important marine habitat. We're hopeful that there will be a stakeholder advisory council. There will be a way to engage stakeholders, whether that's the New Jersey Sierra Club, as well as the offshore wind and fishing and others, important stakeholder groups across the region, and then there will be future comment periods. And so, there's still issues to work out, and there's, I'm sure, many questions that you might have. And so I wanted to take this moment, first of all, to say thank you, but then to really spend the rest of the time today trying to answer questions. So what I'll do now is I'll stop sharing my screen, and we can, go through questions that may come up through the chat, and then go from there. So thank you all, and I'm excited to answer your questions.
Noah, thank you very much. That was a very exciting presentation. Going to the chat, Kip Cherry wrote, the canyon is about 100 miles out, so this may be far out for wind turbines, but will the sanctuary designation have any impact on the wind turbines and how they might work?
So this is, so historically, the sanctuaries that are currently in existence, there are no offshore wind projects near them. So this is, in a sense, a new issue for the agency. And as they're working to set up the boundaries for a sanctuary, they're also trying to decide what role NOAA should play in offshore wind. And there's sort of a difference of opinion, if you will, between the federal agency that regulates and permits wind, the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, and NOAA sanctuaries. So right now, BOEM, the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, regulates wind, and they think that they're the only agency that has the authority to do so. NOAA is evaluating whether the sanctuary program could defer and give authority to BOEM to regulate wind within a sanctuary, and that's sort of a question that's being determined. So at this stage, what we're thinking about is like how to draw the boundaries in a way that does not overlap with where wind could be, for example, and thinking about what areas are important for wind and what areas are important for habitat protection. And so as a part of our comments, WCS articulated a variety of criteria that we think NOAA should use to consider how to draw the boundaries. We also know that New York and New Jersey are engaged in a process to sort of identify deeper water areas where wind is important or could be important. And that's happening literally as we speak, and it's sort of happening into the sort of through the fall. So that kind of input can help the federal government decide as well where the sanctuary could be and where wind could be. So does that answer the question?
Yeah, it sounds great. Now, Wesley Brown asks, I'm very familiar with the Stellwagen Bank Marine Sanctuary, and how have you used their success and story as a way of inspiring the proposal of the Hudson Canyon Sanctuary, and how much are you reaching out to NOAA Woods Hole for research supporting this effort?
Yeah, so we've definitely been talking to stakeholders that are familiar with, from New England, that are familiar with Stellwagen Bank. Some of the marine mammals that are migrating through New York and New Jersey waters are going up to Stellwagen each year and then coming back through our waters. And so in a sense, by protecting Hudson Canyon, you're sort of creating a corridor of sanctuaries. So we're thinking actively about how to learn lessons about marine mammal monitoring, to learn lessons about the interaction between fishing and the sanctuary in Stellwagen Bank, and how that can be applied off of New Jersey and New York. We know that Woods Hole, but also Rutgers and Monmouth University and Stevens Institute, as well as Stony Brook and even Cornell University, we're all doing, there's lots of different academic and oceanographic institutions doing research along the East Coast, along the New York, New Jersey Bight. And so, we have partnerships and collaborations for research and outreach with Woods Hole, but also with other academic and other research institutions. And so we've been working to build that support from those organizations and individuals. So the 110 scientists that signed a letter of support come from across the region. I believe we do have support from each of those organizations, and that's a way to show that there's an interest in increased research and monitoring and to support the work of a Hudson Canyon sanctuary.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, again, from Kip is she's more concerned about construction, about how wind turbines might have an impact. There's stationary types and there's other ones that float and so forth. What thoughts are there about protecting the environment from the installation of these?
Yeah, so there's a lot, that's a really interesting question. And there's a lot of work going into that, both off of New Jersey and New York, as well as across the region. So there's, as you noted, as the questioner noted, there's sort of two different main types of technologies. There's, turbines that are sort of pile driven, or some, that are fixed to the surface, the sea floor, and then there are also floating turbines that are tethered through cables to the sea floor. And for the turbines that are, whether it's pile driven or gravity based foundations, there's different impacts. So there's with pile driven turbines, you see impacts from noise as they're literally sort of pounded into the sea floor, and also increased shipping to sort of stage and construct any type of turbine. So that presents risks in terms of ocean noise, in terms of vessel strikes, in terms of even the risk of pollution, spills and sort of accidental dumping. When it comes to some of the floating turbines, which currently that's feasible and maybe like 100 to 200 meter depths, we're still learning what those impacts could be. So you have these cables that are sort of floating across, sort of in the midwater, connecting different turbines, and so we're not sure what sort of risks that poses to migratory species, and so there's a lot of work to assess that right now. There's also questions about how larger scale development of these turbines might impact currents. And so as I described earlier, the Hudson Canyon is really important for a variety of reasons, but one of those is that it's a place where there's a lot of upwelling. So currents, drag colder water from the deep sea to the surface. And there's some question about how large of a buffer there needs to be between the edge of the canyon and the turbine to make sure that the turbines aren't changing the sort of water currents that are so important ecologically for driving primary productivity. So there's a lot of these questions that are still outstanding. And that's in part what's happening right now with the state of New Jersey and the state of New York, trying to assess what the environmental benefits and risks are associated with deeper water wind, as well as finding ways to minimize the impacts from wind turbines the ecological impacts from wind turbines in shallower waters. And what we see at WCS and the New York Aquarium is like there's a real opportunity to grow the number of jobs tied to biological and ecological monitoring, to assess the baseline conditions, to have long-term monitoring projects for these developments to make sure that they are living up to the environmental management and mitigation measures that they are being permitted to achieve. And so, one of the strengths we see of a sanctuary designation is that sort of educational and outreach potential, and then the opportunity to invest in career workforce development programs and link that to especially historically underserved communities, to make sure that residents in New Jersey and New York that are interested and could benefit from these jobs economically have the skills and the training programs and the connections to get to take on these jobs. And so we see a real opportunity for NOAA to help provide that federal investment in the workforce development that will help ensure the sort of ecological benefits and minimize the impacts from offshore wind as well.
Thank you.
Yep.
Now, are there going to be turbines constructed upstream from the canyon, which might disturb the canyon? Apparently, there's the Raritan Bay has carved a trench leading to the canyon, and there's concern about sediment from the turbine installation making its way into the canyon portion.
Yeah. So and you could see this in the maps I was showing, or when you look at Google Maps, you can see basically how the Hudson River carved out during the last ice age, carved out the channel, through the harbor, but then further offshore, and that ultimately carved out the canyon where the shelf drops to the deep sea. And yes, we do see sediment transport from the Hudson River estuary all the way offshore into the deep sea. And this is something that we are studying, and that other organizations are studying in terms of how wind development or other human uses impacts that transport. And that's something that we don't know a whole lot about. So I think that's where we have to sort of, in some sense, we both have to move quickly to achieve our climate and greenhouse gas carbon neutrality goals, but we also need to operate as much as possible with the precautionary principle and use the best informed science. And so there's an organization called the regional, the RWSC, the Regional Science Wind Collaborative, all these acronyms, that are bringing together academic researchers, industry scientists from the fishing industry to study a range of impacts, including sediment transport, but also habitat impacts and impacts to the oceanographic and sort of physical oceanography, those currents, for example, to understand how offshore wind development might impact a variety of different oceanographic processes in our region.
Okay, and why is the squid industry use some ink to go against the this proposal, and what other organizations have been against it, and also how can we as individuals advocate for it?
Mm-hmm. So the squid industry group, it's Sea Freeze. It's based in Rhode Island, and there are other fishing organizations that have opposed this. They are concerned, and I don't want to put words in their mouth, but I think the general, you should read their comment letters if you really want to dive deep into this. They're concerned that the sanctuary could restrict access for fishing, both commercial fishing in this case, or potentially from some recreational fishing individuals. They're worried that they would lose access, so the ability to fish for squid along the canyon. And as I've said, and I think WCS has always been saying publicly and privately and in our public comments and so forth, we recommend that the fishing continue, both commercial and recreational fishing continue, and that it continue under the existing fishery management authorities. So the government agencies that regulate fisheries now would continue to regulate fisheries in the future. But the aquarium and WCS, we do not make that decision. And so because the process is sort of slow and methodical, some of the fishing industry groups are concerned that the agency could change its mind and regulate fisheries through the sanctuary. And so that's, generally speaking, that's the kind of opposition we've seen, is sort of based on that kind of perspective. The second part of the question was about how individuals can weigh in. So the NOAA Sanctuary Program has a website for the Hudson Canyon designation, and I can dig it up and put it into the chat. They are accepting public comments throughout full multi-year designation process. You know, you're always welcome to reach out and communicate with NOAA staff, even if there isn't an official, if the official comment period has closed, as we're currently in this sort of interim phase. So there's always a chance to weigh in. There's a chance to, you know, share out information with your friends and family and other partner organizations. And so, for example, you know, I always welcome the chance to talk to other groups, whether it's virtually like this or to come out in person if people are, you know, starting to meet in person again, especially, you know, across New Jersey. You know, we're always looking to talk to other partners and build support from new organizations. So I'd welcome the chance to talk with other groups if you had suggestions.
Yeah, that'd be great if you could put in the notice into the chat.
Yeah, let me get that.
Yeah, and if everybody could just take 5 minutes and just advocate it for tonight, that'd be wonderful, or do it tomorrow. All right, well, I think we got pretty much through the chat. We had a couple of people admiring the pictures and so forth. We could open it up for just general questions. If people want to just unmute yourselves and you could ask NOAA some questions, and then we can call it a night.
I have a follow-up question, Jonathan.
Sure.
Noise is a big issue, I think. And I think that this is the one that people are getting hung up on. Installing the beds for the foundations for the wind turbines is a very noisy affair, and will really be injurious to any animals that are hanging around. And certainly one can choose timing such that migratory animals are not in the area, but then there are some, of course, that are in the area permanently. We've heard about bubble curtains as one way to mitigate noise, but we really haven't heard too much that's really very definitive about anything. And but we hear a lot of things about, especially for the whales, what the noise will do to them and how far it travels. So do you have any more thoughts about this issue? Because I think it's a big one, and I think it'll affect how close wind turbines can be to the canyon. Certainly there's going to be some kind of a buffer around the canyon, I would think. But I noticed that you've got 3 oil or natural gas drilling events. What stopped that? Was that related to noise, or was that related to some other pollution, or what was the issue there?
So you're absolutely right, Kip. There's ocean noise is a really important and in some sense under-recognized issue in the ocean. And there's no impacts from energy development, but there's also noise impacts from shipping and other human use activities. So, you know, the way that WCS approaches it is not just specific to the offshore wind industry, but also thinking about ways to minimize and reduce reduce noise, I apologize, from other sectors as well. And also just to sort of assess what are the baseline, what's called anthropogenic noise conditions. So what are the noises created by human activities? And so one of the sort of opportunities we see is that there's an effort through sanctuaries around the country to just sort of study the baseline noise. What's the background noise created by human activities in sanctuaries, and what are the ways to minimize and mitigate them generally from different sectors? Now, you definitely highlighted one of the sort of potential impacts and important impacts that we're thinking carefully about for offshore wind. And so part of, you described, one of the ways, the bubble curtains, for example, or other sort of ways to assess what species are present in near real time is another really important way to minimize the impacts of noise on protected species. So the research that my colleague, Dr. Howard Rosenbaum, and colleagues at Woods Hole are doing to assess in near real time what marine mammals are present in the Empire Wind lease area is one way to really minimize the impact. So for example, we're building up a robust data set about when marine mammals are present in an area where wind will be developed. So we have a sense of when species are less likely to be present. And so that can help complement the sort of the monitoring efforts by people that would stand out on boats and observe, or be up in planes and observe from above the development site. Then there's also ways just to sort of limit the noise altogether. So there's technologies to use gravity-based foundations, in a sense using suction cups to sort of adhere to the seafloor for those turbines that are attached to the seafloor. And that's another type of technological solution to minimize ocean noise, because the noise from offshore wind comes not just primarily from pounding, the turbines into the ground, but also from vessel, traffic. And so there are ways to harness technology from the Navy and other vessel quieting technologies to minimize ocean noise from shipping. So there's a variety of ways to do this in conjunction with offshore wind. And so, we understand that this can increase the cost. And so we're trying to find a way to use best available science to be as targeted and cost effective as possible, to make it as environmentally responsible, but also thinking about the sort of economic impacts, right? We want to make sure that renewable energy is cost competitive with other sources of energy as well. So it's thinking carefully and collaboratively about how to sort of minimize noise. And your other question was about the offshore oil and gas leases. So as I'm sure so the test drilling sites from the 70s and 80s, those were never developed from a commercial standpoint. And the closest we got was during the Trump administration. The Trump administration proposed seismic surveys off of the East Coast, basically from New Jersey south. And that was looking to assess the resource. So we're at the stage where there's at least to the south of us, oil and gas companies were trying to assess what areas, to assess what areas would be prime oil and gas, development areas. And that is actually another source of noise, in a sense. The surveys are in a sense shooting out, energy, sound, and letting it reverberate off the sea floor. And one of the ways that we were able to stop this, that other groups really led the effort, was to challenge the permits for the seismic surveys to have legal challenges in court, because they were going to impact marine mammals to such a large degree. And WCS and the New York Aquarium, we led an effort actually with 9 other aquariums to prepare an amicus brief to oppose the drilling. So we were leveraging our scientific research, and we partnered with Pace University's Environmental Law Clinic to develop an amicus brief. And we were poised to submit it, but the case just at the towards the end of the Trump administration put a final sort of nail in that coffin, at least for the last 5-year plan. And so what we're worried about is that in a future, 5-year plan, maybe not in the Biden administration, but in a future, administration, there could be an effort again to expand oil and gas exploration and potentially leasing in our region. So
okay. Well, I know Tony has his hand up, and then we also have something else in the chat which is related to what you just talked about. Go ahead, Tony.
Great.
Yes, I was just wondering how many deaf or hard of hearing fish there are swimming around in the ocean with all this noise. But it occurs to me that there are plans for hundreds of turbines so far, perhaps thousands in the future. And as Kip was saying, the noise from the construction of foundations for one can be quite impactful. But will these all be built at the same time, or will they be built one after another? And we're talking about huge expanses of ocean being farmed with these things. So I calculated at one point that from Cape May to, I think it's Wildwood or a little bit further up, you could drive for an hour on the parkway, and that's how long one of these fields will be. So it's huge expanses of ocean covered with these things, and quite a lot of noise involved in the construction. I wonder, will it keep the marine mammals and other fish away for months and months at a time, or years perhaps, or what? Are you looking at it from that perspective also?
Yeah, so there's a long-term effort as well to understand the cumulative impacts, I think, and that's sort of what you're getting at, Tony. There's the impacts from one individual turbine, then there's the individual project, and then there's multiple projects over multiple years. And so, there are many people trying to tackle this question. This is a very complex question, whether it's the state of New Jersey and New York, whether it's the federal government, whether it's some of these academic institutions, or, certainly, my organization is trying to contribute to this as well, is to try to assess not just what the impact of one individual project is, but the cumulative impact across one project and across multiple projects at the same time. And so there's this, there's a huge effort to expand research and monitoring that's coming out of federal resources, that's coming out of state resources, that's coming out of money from the developers and academic institutions to try to answer these questions. And in some sense, we're still learning as we go. We sort of have to build the plane as we go, in a sense, as we're flying. And you're absolutely right that there's large areas that have been leased. Just because that area has been leased does not mean that the whole area would be developed as offshore wind. The developers are thinking about like what habitats within that would not be suitable and what areas would be, overlaid with how the wind speed and consistency, overlaps. So, even though the map shows these large tracts, it doesn't mean that the whole region would become one large, offshore wind development. And I think, we should be pretty honest. This is a large scale project. These are industrial scale facilities, just like we have industrial scale energy facilities on land. And it's, a new and permanent, or at least 50-year, multiple decades long project. And so we don't fully understand how that will impact marine species, will impact the fisheries, will impact the habitats, because it's something new to this region. And there are lessons to be learned from Europe, and we're doing our best. And I know, the states, the state of New York and the state of New Jersey, one of the strategies that has been in place at the sort of state level is to really set a floor, so that the companies and the environmental permitting goes above and beyond whatever the federal government sets as the requirements. That we can make sure that they're tailored to the really local stakeholders in New York and New Jersey, and really expand the types of monitoring and hopefully enforcement that will complement the permitting process at the federal level. And the way that the states are able to do that, because this is all happening in federal waters, so technically the seafloor belongs to all of us and is managed by the federal government, but the states are using their authority to oversee and approve what are called power purchase agreements. So the Department of the Utility Commission basically oversees how, at the state level, oversees how the utilities purchase energy. So when the offshore wind company has to sell energy to a New Jersey or a New York State utility, they have to abide by the state rules. And so the states are basically using that leverage to increase the environmental and also social equity goals that we have at the local level to sort of enhance the performance, hopefully for these developments.
Great. Now, no, you just have like 2 minutes to go
Okay.
before we have to end, and I want you to again remind people how to advocate for you. But I know Wesley has a real quick question, and then we'll call that quits for the night as far as questions. Wesley, do you have your question?
Yeah, Jonathan. No, I was wondering, again, thinking of another coast all of coastal California, but particularly the Southern California, from Santa Barbara all the way down to Mexico. How much are you aware of, whether it's at the NOAA level? Are they talking with the Department of Navy, which for a number of years, whether it's the Port of Long Beach or the huge naval operations that are down that way, in terms of, the gray whales, marine mammals, submarine noises, levels, let alone, windshore development. I mean, they seem to be, for various reasons, more advanced in this, farther along, in various processes. Are you picking their brains in terms of, we have the North Atlantic right whale here, and the endless ship strikes, that go right through the canyon and farthest, north and south. I'm just, concerned that, with the combination, of the offshore wind development, and already like the Port of Long Beach, Newark, New York, mostly, Jersey, huge shipping channels and lanes, it doesn't sound like a good brew.
So you're absolutely right to point out that there are sanctuaries off the national marine sanctuaries off the coast of California. They're also off the coast of Florida and the Gulf Coast. But we have been talking to stakeholders and agency staff from the West Coast to learn about the experience there for sure. The effort for a sanctuary program in general is to try to balance uses and support conservation. These are not fully protected areas. They allow some uses and minimize the impacts from those uses, and then in some instances, prevent uses. And so from the California experience, the vast majority of the California coast is either closed or is has historically been closed to oil and gas exploration and development through the designation of different sanctuaries. We also know that, like here as well, there's many different military and naval assets and installations. So there's efforts to balance the impacts from noise and other impacts from the Navy and in the sanctuaries as well. And so that is definitely something that we've learned, as we've talked to partners on the West Coast. Part of the overarching vision for the sanctuary work is to sort of be able to highlight how the waters of New York and New Jersey are both ecologically important and economically important, and really to support balancing sustainable use and conservation. And so, there's the sanctuary program provides like this really interactive, deliberative, stakeholder and public process, both through the designation and then through the management process. And I didn't really get into that as much, but there's always sort of multiple chances for public participation. And even though it is a federal program, it's really designed to be driven locally by people and organizations and businesses that build consensus at the local level and help manage with the federal agency, whatever makes the sanctuary special. And, in some ways, Hudson Canyon is this unsung hero, unsung special place in our waters. And so just by talking about it and building awareness, we're trying to build this ocean ethic and sort of help build a broader coalition and new partnerships for conservation and sustainable use. And so we see this as like a long-term ongoing project here. And that, you know, this, while it may have started and sort of picked up steam this summer, we think that there's many exciting ways to collaborate, not just with the New Jersey Sierra Club, but partners across the region. And so hopefully that both answers your question, Wesley, as well as speaks to the broader and sort of important work that we can do together as this designation process continues.
Well, thank you, Noah. You know, with I think I could speak for everyone. We hope the wind's behind you on this, and that we get blow in the right direction, because as you know, people are concerned about, you know, the like Jill just mentioned, that the League of Conservation Voters, talked about the proposed leases that are moving forward over the next 5 years to put at least another dozen new drilling projects to move forward. And you know, we have a history of New York dumping its trash out there and all this other future mining problems and everything else. It seems like this onslaught against the environment is really whipping up its fury to attack. And then you have the global warming with all its and that acidification of the ocean. So these poor creatures need all the help they can get. And so what you're doing is a real blessing. So again, if you want to put in the chat real quick or send me an email, I could send it out to everyone. A quick way, just actually, why don't you send in an email as well, and I'll send it.
Yeah,
out
I'll send it in an email. I just dug it up and put it there too, but I can definitely send it so that it's.
I want to thank you very much. It was an exciting program, and for everybody, thank you for coming tonight. And again, please keep in mind our future programs. I'll be sending out emails shortly. I know that Bill and Lois mentioned that the Lehigh University thing. I'll send that out, as well as our own talks on wind and also on highlands and developments in our area. Thank you very much, folks, and have a nice evening.